Welcome to our Good Friday time of reflection. This afternoon we will be journeying with Jesus through the day of that first Good Friday, from the beginning to the end of the day. We'll be using scriptures from each of the Gospels, interspersed with reflections that were written by Pastor Vince Gahardi. There will be plenty of time to reflect and pray between each one as we are led in the Teze chant, Jesus Remember Me, that reflects the words of the thief on the cross. When we come to the end of the day, we will be remembering Jesus' burial. But there will be no formal ending, as we, like those first disciples, remain in darkness from the time of Jesus' death until the brightness of the new day on Easter Sunday.
Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. "What shall I do with Jesus, who's called the Messiah?" Pilate asked. They all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him!" When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." All the people answered, "His blood is on us and on our children." Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Why doesn't Jesus say anything? Why doesn't he proclaim who he is? But he says nothing. Surely there are others who will speak up for him. Where are the blind who were healed, and the people who ate the bread and the fish on the hillside? Yet no one speaks. Jesus stands alone. Jesus stands before Pontius Pilate, the power of Rome. Weakness stands before strength. And yet Pilate, the ruthless enforcer for the empire, is not in control. He cannot make Jesus confess. He cannot silence the crowds. For all his power, he cannot find the courage to do what is right. So he does what is safe, and he washes his hands. He washes his hands, a symbol that he lacks courage and lacks the commitment to do what is right and just. But it is the one who stands before him in chains, bruised from beating, spit on his face, who is the person with real strength. Pilate washes his hands and abandons Jesus. But Jesus doesn't wash his hands of the Father's will or of us. Jesus is determined to love you and me.
come into your kingdom, Jesus, remember me. When you come into your kingdom, Jesus, remember me. When you come into your kingdom, Jesus, remember me. When you come into your kingdom, Jesus, remember me. When you come into your kingdom, Jesus, remember me. When you come into your kingdom, Jesus, remember me. When you come into your kingdom, Jesus, remember me. When you come into your kingdom.
Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers round him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. Then they twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spat on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. I cringe at the pain of the thorns, but I am wounded far more deeply at the humiliation and degradation Jesus suffered. Stripped naked for all to stare at, a crown of thorns thrust on his head, a stick in his hand, and a scarlet robe on his shoulders. Soldiers bowing in mockery, spitting, hitting, and whipping. How cruel people can be to their fellow human beings. We hear of men, women, and children suffering and dying at the hands of others, even those who would claim to love them. How unkind can we be to the people around us? We like to think that we are ready to follow Jesus, who offers us peace and love. But are we? Are we willing to let love and peace control us and lead us to live as people who truly want to serve others, even though it may not always be easy or convenient? There, in Pilate's courtyard, we see a true servant. He was willing to endure anything. No complaints, no protesting his innocence, no cursing, simply accepting the cross for us, enduring all things for us. The thorns, the whip, the mockery, the nails, the cruel death. He did it all for us. He loves us, even though it is our sin that caused him so much pain.
into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
As the soldiers led him away, they seized Simon from Cyrene, who was on his way in from the country, and put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. I can only imagine the awful weight of the cross Jesus carried. It is not just the weight of wood pressing down on him, but also the weight of the burden that he carried for those whom he loved. He came to offer life, and yet he only received death. Simon from Cyrene was just a bystander, passing through on his way into town from the countryside, and yet he bears the weight of the cross to save Jesus' strength. I asked myself, when the soldiers were looking around for someone to carry the cross, what would I have done? Would I have rushed from the crowd volunteering to carry that cross for Jesus? Or would I have looked away and pretended not to notice what was happening? It is so easy to pretend not to see the needs, the grief, and the suffering around me every day. And yet, I remember something that Jesus said, something about taking up my cross and following him. Jesus said something about becoming a servant of all, of putting myself last and others first. Is this what Jesus is showing me? Is this what this man from Cyrene is showing me?
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
A large number of people followed him, including women who mourned and wailed for him. Jesus turned and said to them, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. For the time will come when you will say, 'Blessed are the childless women, the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if people do these things when the tree is green, what will happen to them when it is dry?" As Jesus struggles along the road toward that awful place of death, a group of women among the crowd following Jesus were crying, wailing, already grieving Jesus' approaching death. So now, as Jesus bears the most unimaginable pain of body and heart, he shows incredible love and mercy. He is about to die and is suffering unbelievable pain, and yet he is more concerned with others than with his own suffering and impending death. He stops to speak with them, to warn them of the pain and suffering that they and the whole nation of Israel will experience because of their rejection of the Messiah. Do I ever stop in the midst of my own troubles, like you did, Lord Jesus, to express my concern and care for others? Am I so caught up in living my own life that I lose sight of what is happening in the lives of those around me?
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, dividing them into 4 shares, one for each of them, with the undergarment remaining. The garment was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. "Let's not tear it," they said to one another. "Let's decide by lot who will get it." This happened that the scripture might be fulfilled that said, "They divided my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment." So this is what the soldiers did. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. Jesus is forced to suffer the worst of human indignity. He stands alone as the soldiers strip him, the last thing away that he possesses, and play games to see who will claim it. They thought that Jesus was no different to the hundreds of other criminals they crucified. Yet he is completely different. Just yesterday, Jesus removed his cloak and laid it aside to wash his disciples' feet. Now he's allowing others to strip off his clothes. He could have stopped it. He could have stopped it all. Yet he doesn't. He allows them to publicly disgrace him. He's left with nothing, not even human decency. He gave away everything to be utterly humiliated. Stripped naked for us, for me, for you. Why? Why does he allow himself to be so humiliated? Because of his total commitment to you and me.
It was 9 in the morning when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, "King of the Jews." They crucified 2 rebels with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So, you who are going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, come down off the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. "He saved others," they said, "but he cannot save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we might see and believe." And those crucified with him also heaped insults on him. That last awful step in the journey of death is about to be taken. Jesus is laid on the ground, his arms spread out, so his wrists are on the ends of the crossbar. A spike is driven through each of his wrist bones. The pain is excruciating. Jesus' body is hoisted into place, its weight pressing on his ribcage and lungs, making it almost impossible to breathe. A spike is driven through his feet. With painful effort, the condemned can push up on the spike in his feet to catch his breath, but to do so only prolongs the agony. I want to rage at the injustice of this, the cruelty of the Romans, the hypocrisy of the high priest and the religious leaders, the cowardice of his disciples, and the treachery of Judas, and the fickleness of the crowd. Don't they remember that Jesus only spoke of love, and even loving our enemies? How could they be so cruel to the most perfect human that ever lived? And yet, would we have done anything differently? Are the guilty ones those who were actually there that day and condemned him and hammered in the nails? Or is it human sin that drives in the nails? My sin. I want to pretend I had no part in Jesus' indignity and death, but I was there. Jesus, you are here, dying because of my sin. I was there. It was I who drove in the nails.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
At noon, Darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, surely this man was the Son of God. It is dark in the middle of the day. It seems that the heavens and the earth are grieving, telling us that something is horribly wrong. Jesus, I hear you cry of human pain and desolation. Everyone has forsaken you, but there's one who still hears your prayer, the one you address as my God. The earth shakes. The curtain in the temple is torn right down in the middle. The Holy of Holies is exposed for all to see. What does it mean? Who are you? There's even a Roman who thinks that you are the Son of God. But you are dead. It's too late. What have we done? Is there any hope? Yet you never stopped loving us, even in death. You died because of human sin, because of us. Yet sin is never the final word. God can redeem the worst that human beings can do. We hope and wait.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember.
As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. Like every human being, Jesus was born with nothing and dies naked and alone. The hysterical clamour of the Passion is now quiet. His bruised and blood-stained body, marked with the wounds of nail and spear, is hastily washed and wrapped in a clean linen shroud, and laid in the coldness of the stone tomb. Now, an anonymous corpse, seemingly like any other, he is buried as he was born, in obscurity. No funeral procession, no elaborate mourning. Vaguely the words of promise and resurrection spoken to the disciples in these last days stir in their memories, puzzle them. as they try to piece together what Jesus Christ's death has meant. However, we know how the story ends. We know that this is not the final Amen over Jesus of Nazareth. In just a few short hours, he will emerge from the cold, dark tomb, victorious over sin and death. His agony has been worth it.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.